Holy crap, this episode was crazy. So I have to talk about spoilers, so this is your spoiler warning. So if you haven't checked out this episode, come back because, wow, I got a lot to get into, so let's do it. The episode violently throws us into a cold wasteland, and we saw this in the trailer. This was also heavily foreshadowed in the credit sequence. Check out my breakdown of that in the description. But I also love how, and I think it's so interesting that Irv is the first person that we see in this episode, foreshadowing just how important he is throughout. I also love that there is no setup to this at all. The audience and the characters are the same level of confused. Eventually, we find out that with their innie's consent, the workers are on a team building exercise. Now, Irv has been sus of Helly almost right away after her very lame Night Gardener story, and I'm also not the only person to point out how crazy and elitist this notion of a laborer working at night is. Like, Audi Helly has been so sheltered from the real world, almost as much as her innie, yet this suspicion truly comes to a head in this episode. I adore how this tension has been brewing between Irv and Helly earlier this season, and we really see him grappling with the pain of not being able to see Bert. Like, it is almost unbearable. Things get really nasty when Irv and Helly come to verbal blows, Helly weaponizing Irv's heartbreak in such a cruel, petty way. Like, it's actually really hard to watch. Other Severance fans have pretty much guessed that Helly only ever returned as a mole, and damn, we got the confirmation on this. After nearly freezing to death overnight, Irv wakes up and confronts Helly once again, but she continues to lie, and it literally takes him almost drowning her to get Milchek to turn her back using the Glasgow block, something new to the series and that we can only kind of guess, but it hasn't been fully explained. I said that in my credit sequence breakdown. I wondered if there was some significant meaning between Helly and water, and this definitely proves that theory correct. After this, Irv is, for all intents and purposes, executed, aka fired by Milchek, and it's very much set up like this public execution. Also, speaking of Milchek, holy crap, this is probably the angriest we've seen him thus far. Other really good things in this episode is we get a lot of development between Mark and Helly. The two actually do hook up, which is going to be really interesting because we know that this all the time was a different version of Helly, unbeknownst to Mark. Outside of this incredibly tense and exciting scene, we do get to learn more Egan lore, which I'm only going to briefly talk about here, but I want to dedicate an entire video to. But we are introduced to a new location, the Dieter Egan National Forest. That's where the MDR crew is. And who is Dieter Egan? Well, we learned that in his final hours, Keir Egan dedicated a new appendix, a text so sacred it is forbidden on the severed floor, and that the crew can find this mysterious text in what is called Scissor's Cave, the same grotto that Milchek explains Keir first tamed the Four Tempers. Later on, we learned that Dieter Egan was Keir's brother, and this really weird event that saw Dieter turn into basically like plant life. Because, I don't know how to put this delicately, he was just spanking the old monkey. Again, I skipped over a lot because I want to dedicate an entire video to fully get into this. Overall, wow, I love this episode. This actually might be my favorite episode of the season so far, which is really saying something because this entire season has been just an amazing balance of tense, uncomfortable, and exciting. Throwing us into a brand new environment is really great because it not only breaks us out of the formula for a little while, but the writers use it as a springboard for new lore, a nail-biting showdown between Irv and Helly. Also, it's just interesting to see these innies really seeing and exploring the outside world for the first time. Not to mention these creepy doppelgangers leading the crew to the cave is a subtle form of dread, and I think this is something this show is so amazing at. Speaking of, I also just love the scene with the video of Milchick explaining the outdoor retreat, and it's again masterful because it balances being a humorous satire of these corporate videos, but it's also really subtly creepy. Like, there's cuts in Milchick's monologue that gives it a very unnatural pace, and it just gives it that very uncanny valley feeling, and that creepy synth music at the end. Mwah! Chef's kiss. That Glengarry Glen Ross reference, double chef's kiss. This episode really has it all. It balances the horror, humor, tension, and heartbreaking drama, all while adding to the world building. Again, I plan to make an entire video on the new lore and my theory, so please subscribe so you don't miss out on those. And hey, while you're hanging out with me, please check out these other videos, and I'll see y'all in the next one.